Hello and welcome back. So, we are continuing on with a bit of a skip. Yesterday was entirely spent doing debugging, fixing computer problems, and then finally getting the uh, V1 data model going for this system. And at this point, it's really pretty much just perfectionism if I try to do a whole lot more to it. So what we're going to do in this video is review the current data model, understand what has the system provided, and to explore whether or not it's ready for us to actually get things going. On top of that, we're going to be creating our first skill, which yesterday I had put together something of a skill building skill. I can't say for sure if it's any good. I haven't tested it out yet. In fact, I didn't even read the damn thing. Yesterday was a real hard day. I went through some pretty intense personal stuff, and it let's just say even after years of working on building strong emotional resilience, every now and then life tests me, and it's like, oof, this is why I've trained myself to endure suffering, not to avoid it. So that's taken me a bit to recover from, but I'm doing fine. Got through the worst of it. Yesterday was kind of like a bunch of stuff going bad all at once, and now it looks like things are on the right direction. So we're in the final stretch, by the way. This is, I don't want to say 85% done, but like damn near 85% done. You see, I thought the SQL database, SQL queries, the database model design, the everything we're doing here, I thought that would be the relatively easy part because the agent had given me a data model that seemed reasonable. And so I thought, okay, let's go with that. Little did I realize that was the old opponent AI psychosis. Now, it's not necessarily psychosis in that I thought it was some godly, crazy good system. It's more so that I didn't have the awareness yet, the experience, the education to look at that and to say, that's definitely not going to work. In my mind, I was thinking, that's probably not going to work, but maybe it's a good place to start. And I guess from that perspective, I wasn't wrong because building on top of that created what I can now say, and this is something not generated by the AI, but generated by myself and uh, articulated and written out mostly by the AI. Now I've got something I genuinely feel proud of. Well, the last few weeks and months, it's been like, okay, I have this idea. I'm pretty sure it can happen, but I don't know how to bring it together. And I felt like a crazy person. But then I saw this video of a bro in Europe that he loves piano, and I guess he's always had an itching, burning, craving desire to teach an animal how to play the piano. And I thought, who the hell wakes up in the morning, goes about their day, lives life looking like a normal human, and then goes to bed, and the entire time they have a persistent thought of, wow, I wish I could teach an animal to play piano. And the guy did. He went and bought an octopus from a local Asian market. He then was able to earn the trust of this octopus by training it and feeding it and spending time with it. And he had a bunch of 3D printed tools that he used to create a custom interface to help the octopus learn how to play the piano. And then, sure enough, he would go and sit there and play with the octopus, and the octopus would always be staring at the piano and want to play it. So it's a fascinating concept. So the whole idea is, as human, this is the takeaway, that we all have something inside of us that it may not be popular, it may not be sexy, and in my case, it damn sure hasn't been profitable. But I know that this is something that once created can do a lot of good. And we're bringing it together now. So I've got a mantra and I'm going to practice this on the camera. I like to start these videos with an introduction, kind of go into just a little bit of a ramble, because that's my way of just letting out whatever's on my mind. So then I have an empty cup with which to fill with this session of whatever we're working on. And so it's one of those things where I thought, well, If I could take my experience of running an agency, coaching other agency owners, overseeing tens of millions of dollars of advertising, and having personally scaled not just one, but three different e-com stores past the seven-figure mark, I know for sure that I can make this happen. I know for a fact I can do this because the same stuff that I've done, which was able to get high ticket sales, that was able to scale solar to multiple five figures a day worth of advertising twice, and was able to uh, turn into conversions across e-com stores on multiple niche markets. I understood this patterns. And they say that expertise and mastery is really just a matter of pattern recognition. And so the pattern I realized is the missing component of AI systems is what's called content decomposition. Now, that probably doesn't sound like it means a whole lot to people who don't spend an inordinate amount of times following Russell Brunson, but it's something where what content decomposition means is that when you see a piece of content, you probably don't know it, but that there's an anatomy to content, and the anatomy of content might mean you're going to have some kind of a hook that's designed to grab your attention. You're typically going to have a lead that's going to draw you through some type of an experience, and then typically it leads towards a call to action, some kind of a intentional direction that the author and creator is trying to move you toward. So when you notice this pattern, it becomes something you see everywhere. And when you're creating content, you don't just start with a blank piece of paper like you're writing an essay in high school. Instead, what you do is you think of it like, okay, well, what am I trying to achieve with this piece of content? Who am I targeting? And exactly what am I going to do in order to have the best chance of achieving that objective? And it's fascinating because what I'm describing is like the, let's call it mass communication or social media side of things. But there's another side of things, which is the sales side, which for anybody who's made a couple thousand cold calls across their life, or has knocked on hundreds of doors, or has sold hundreds of thousands of dollars a quarter personally worth of business services, you're going to know that sales will humble even the most thick-headed of stubborn people, because it doesn't matter what you think, and also it doesn't matter what you feel. If you're not getting sales, that means usually you're doing something wrong. See, if you can talk to 100 people and you can't sell anybody, you're definitely the problem. If you're selling something of genuine value, if you're talking to people with a genuine need, yeah, it means you're not communicating it well enough. And there's a myriad of reasons why someone's not able to sell. And, well, figuring out what that reason is kind of like going into the doctor and saying, hey, sometimes I feel a pain in a part of my body. What does that mean? What causes that? Or like going to the mechanic and saying, my car is making a funny sound. What's the problem? it just it just doesn't work that way. You're going to have to gather more information, probably run some tests, and potentially and experiment with different potential solutions. It's a very similar situation here. And so what's culminated inside of me over the last couple of years is 5 plus years in direct sales experience, and then another 5 years in digital advertising experience, and now an additional 5 years in the tech industry, mostly in data engineering, but I've spent quite a bit of time in product management as well. So, connecting these dots together amongst all sorts of other random experiences along the way has showed me that even though AI is pretty damn bad at a lot of things, it's really good at other things. And if you give it a clear, specific breakdown of what you want it to do, especially if you give it examples and some guidance, it's extraordinary what it'll put together. And so that's the thing that's I know it's a toxic trait. I know it's a problem. And I know the damage, the hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses, the string of bodies of broken relationships and broken opportunities that have been the consequence of this. But I am not able to be in two places at once. My brain, I think I'm a little retarded. I know the official word is autism or on the spectrum, as the cool kids call it. But I know that I'm not working with a full deck of cards. I get it. At the same time, I know I have value. I know that I still have value, even if I'm a little different than other people. And in this case here, while maybe I don't have the capability to bounce from this thing to that thing to those things to eat these things, but I know that if I stay focused and I keep doing what I'm doing, I can move mountains. And that's what I believe I've put together here. Because what I did was the same way you can break down the anatomy of a piece of content, you can break down the anatomy of a sales conversation. You can also break down the anatomy of a tech product. And when you understand that pretty much everything is a matter of content decomposition, and then recognize that AI is really, really good at decomposition and pattern recognition, it's the thing that has not only kept me up at night, but has been the singular obsessive focus for more than 5 years at this point. 2 years officially working towards it full time. And I hyped the hell out of this with a 10-minute introduction because I do believe in this recording. We're probably going to witness the first attempt, the first version of this thing coming to life. I call it a content compiler. Now, there's already things called content compilers, so it can get confusing. A traditional content compiler will convert a file from like JSON into Markdown or into XML or into, it basically turning one type of file into a different type of file. And the thing that does that is a content compiler. This is a modern content compiler. So in the modern version, what I see is we take whatever kind of content we're making and we start out with a brief about what is it that we're actually trying to generate. And then with that brief, we then give that to an agent and then have it go through a series of steps to actually build the thing we're asking it to. And so when we mix these together, we get a well structured brief that tells the agent what to do, and we give the agent a well structured SOP, meaning that it knows exactly what steps it needs to take and it can just follow them incrementally. So it doesn't have to think about, well, maybe I do this or maybe I do that. It doesn't have to consider the varying levels of complexity. No, instead, all it needs to do is simply follow the instructions. And this is extremely powerful because the modern agents, they're more than capable of completing consistent actions. The challenge is that the number of actions required easily ends up being in the hundreds if you want to break this down individually, which no person is going to be able to take the time to physically manage it, which is where we enter with automation. And I'm not going to go through the whole history of automation or nothing like that, but let's just say when you've been in digital advertising since 2017, you are no stranger to automation, whether that's business automation, network automation, system automation, process automation. If you can name it, it's kind of like Bubba Gump from Forrest Gump. Kind of like that, Bubba from Forrest Gump. It is one of those things where you can have this kind of shrimp, that shrimp, these shrimp, those shrimp. Same thing when it comes down to these. And I realized that, well, the technology already exists, the expertise already exists. What if we make this happen? And I'd been thinking, well, how would I do that? And I've explored over the last 2 years every reasonable technology and many unreasonable technologies to make this happen. I've tested out almost all of them, building MVPs and exploring their ecosystems, learning what other people are doing, observing the solutions that other people have built, analyzing what's relevant, what's not to me, and ultimately putting together and further refining a thesis of, well, based on current available technology, how could I create a content compiler that, as opposed to converting a file from, let's say, Markdown into XML or whatever type of other file you want to have, what if instead we can have a task brief, have an SOP, and then tell the agent to navigate through that SOP, but decompose the steps to an excruciating detail in a collaborative environment with other agents. I know that sounds super abstract, so I'm going to step back for a moment and actually explain what that means in a completely accessible, non technical way. So if you've ever picked up a magazine and flipped through and noticed that sometimes there's these sprawling stories that are a lot of words. If there are words in a magazine that's written in the long form, that's expensive real estate. Because for every page on that magazine, there's an amount of money that the company earns to advertise. So if they're choosing not to advertise on that page, that means that they believe there must be enough value from those words to substantiate not making money. On top of that, the average consumer is mentally cooked as a result of brain rot. So, to be able to have an article inside of a magazine that is interesting enough for someone to not only be willing to look at and notice when they're flipping through seeing the pretty pictures, but to also take the time to read and ideally be influenced by this article. There's a lot of steps that goes into that. Again, it's not high school where you just bust open a blank page and start writing. No, there's an entire team. You've got designers and editors, copywriters, conversion engineers. You have QA testers. You have all sorts of people that work together collaboratively. And maybe the researcher compiles a bunch of information or aggregates a bunch of information, and then maybe you have the junior writing team that might to put together some outlines and some potential headlines or a long list of headlines. You're usually going to have a senior editor of some type who's going to be responsible for making the final decision and guiding the overall process. And then typically you can imagine you have a director who's going to be in charge of the entire operation and looking at the full picture of within the magazine. And then you're able to bring these people together as a team. Usually, from a technical standpoint, you'd be using a software like a CRM, where people can go and coordinate with each other, open up tasks and projects, and provide comments on what's being done. Say, hey, here's a thing. Would you please review it for me? Give me feedback. Let me know if it's approved. And by having all these systems together, that's how we come up with the really good content, or at least the very valuable content you'll find in traditional media. So I've done this for several years. It's a let's just say, as well as I know the back of my hand, I understand the process for generating content on an industrial scale. So I thought, well, I don't think that's normal. I don't think that everybody has that. What if I could take my experience and the pattern recognition skills I've developed from that and create a digital content room? Make it to where it's an environment that the agents are able to interact together to build something. And then if it works the way that I think it does, based on the experiments that I've done, it should actually produce better than human quality content. Now, maybe not the first time like in this video, but it should be impressive the first time. But it's really difficult. Because the same way that I just described having a whole bunch of people work together, I only scratched the surface. See, different roles have different personalities and they have different incentives and requirements, different skill sets, different challenges, different access to resources. And then to try to balance all of these differing incentives and perspectives and get everybody to align and to do so consistently enough to crank out content with humans is already a non trivial task. It's not a solved problem. Let's just say that. If you figured it out, you're a multi-million-dollar agency. So, how the hell do we take something that hasn't been figured out and apply it towards digital? And that's why I've sacrificed the last 2 years of my life to an absolute marathon of suffering to stay focused, because I thought, well, it's a pretty small circle of people that could even conceptualize something like this accurately and effectively. An even smaller pool of people who have experience and expertise and have actual real world knowledge of how this works and has gotten results. And then on top of that, it's a even smaller set of people who understands the AI ecosystem and the AI engineering space well enough to navigate the entire ecosystem, know which products are the worst, the trade-offs and the benefits of each one, and then to filter down to the ones that are specifically best, and then to actually use them and set them up for the thing that needs to be done. And to come up with the design and the ideas and the theories, ironically, that's the easy part. I spent more than a year and a half working on that. But it turns out that's just the beginning when you get it mapped out. The hard part is actually putting it together. And that's what I've beaten my head on the table about the last few months. So, anyways, we're over 20 minutes at this point. I'm glad that I got this out because for sure, this concept, this journey, this vision, it's been something that has it has been a very long journey. But why did I do this? It's because I see what's on the other side of this. What's on the other side of this is the ability to help people who don't have a voice like myself, people who might be a little bit special. Maybe their brains don't operate the same as others. Well, now a content compiler would be able to pull content from wherever it's coming from. Maybe it's a tweet, maybe it's a LinkedIn post, maybe it's an ultra long form 5 hour podcast video on YouTube. And the content compiler would be able to translate that into the mind of whoever it is that's listening. So if somebody's brain works a little bit different, maybe somebody is dyslexic, or perhaps somebody just doesn't, maybe they get really triggered by certain subjects. And so they need content to be filtered in a way that doesn't, mention the color orange or purple or something because that makes them freak out. Whatever the thing might be, it would usually be unreasonable or unrealistic to imagine that they would find a solution to access information. And information gatekeeping is the ultimate way of gatekeeping privilege, because privilege comes from having information. So those who have the education typically have the advantage, especially if they know how to take action on it. So what I see here is a system that could make it to where, well, what if it didn't matter what language you speak? What if it doesn't matter how technically intelligent you are? What if it didn't matter what arbitrary geographic location you happen to spawn at? What if you had access to the same information, access to the same knowledge, and thus, by default, access to the same potential of anybody else who potentially does already have and gone through this knowledge? And that's the vision that I saw. So, anyways, that's enough rambling. I've got this all out of my system. I got myself aligned on what this looks like. And most terrifying of all, I got out of my head and now I'm in my voice. So, I'm actually going to end this recording here. We'll use this as a separate one. I think it's pretty neat. I think this is my first breakdown of what the hell is a content compiler. I'm only scratching the surface here, of course. I know it sounds airy fairy to help artistic people consume content more effectively so they can learn better and somewhat be able to normalize themselves in a world that is increasingly hostile, especially for those who are different. But that's not the only benefit to it. You see, advertising is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I mean, even Google alone is a $1 trillion company, and where do they make their money from? Advertising, obviously. Facebook, trillion, advertising. Why is advertising so popular? Because a sale doesn't get made unless a person knows a product exists. How do they know that a product exists? Somebody got it in front of them at some point and convinced them there's a benefit to it. Some people call that sales, but when you do it systematically, it's called advertising. And because of the advertising experience, I realized, well, we can kill two birds with one stone. We can do something objectively good, the ability to mass produce ultra high quality content that is hyper personalized to the specific target audience. And we can also create more effective advertising, more effective product designs, more effective sales funnels. And the beauty is that if you can help a company sell more, you can substantiate charging more. And so there is a financial incentive associated to this, while also a personal incentive of being able to help to unlock the fullest potential of the world. So I'm going to dive on in. We're at just under 25 minutes. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I, I've been massively overwhelmed with this task, and I'm so looking forward to seeing it come to life. And luckily, today is just Saturday morning, so I believe that probably by about noon, we'll have gotten the first, at least the roughest test, and at least see the thing come together. There's a couple of real technical steps I got to make. I'm sure there's going to be problems along the way. And hey, today is not likely to be worse than yesterday, so I'm ready for it. Anyways, on the next video, I'm going to actually start the streaming part of this where I'm going to record myself actually doing the work here. I'm not sharing my screen anymore like what I used to do because my computer isn't powerful enough to handle that, unfortunately. But I will go ahead and make sure to articulate what's happening, as this is what I'm doing to practice being able to use my voice. It's taken years, and I'm grateful for my mother for putting me through over half a decade of speech training when I was in elementary school, or else I wouldn't be able to talk, and then I would have just stayed in this special class and spent my entire life thinking that I'm too retarded to function in the real world. But thankfully, that's not the case. So, we're going to continue onward, we're going to make this happen, and we're going to make something amazing. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. There'll be a whole lot more later on, and when this thing succeeds, oh, it opens up so many doors that I cannot wait to start to talk about. But that is a tale for another day. Until we see each other next, bye for now, my friends.